I still remember the sound of his voice, sharp and careless, as if it had been carved from stone. "Company matters come first, Dad. She's your problem." Those were the words my son threw at me while his mother lay unconscious in the ICU. He said them without looking me in the eye, his gaze fixed on his phone, checking golf tee times like that was the only thing that mattered. An hour later, his number flashed on my caller ID. His voice had changed. Gone was the arrogance, replaced by panic. "Dad, I'm ruined. I can't access anything. Help me." That was the moment I whispered the line that had been sitting on my tongue for weeks. "Now you've got nothing but time." You might wonder how a father gets to that point with his own son. It didn't happen overnight. No, this road was paved with long nights, unpaid bills, and the cold silence of hospital corridors. Let me take you back to where it really began, at Mercy Hospital in Youngstown, Ohio, where the only thing I could do was sit, wait, and pray. The waiting room smelled of burnt coffee and disinfectant. The vending machine groaned every time someone tried to get a pack of pretzels. I'd sit there with a styrofoam cup in my hands, letting the lukewarm coffee burn my tongue just enough to remind me I was still alive. Maggie, my wife of 47 years, was lying behind a wall of glass and machines, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of a ventilator. Nurses in bright sneakers moved in and out of her room. They'd smile politely, but their eyes told the truth. They didn't expect her to wake up. I spent hours watching those monitors, memorizing every blip and beep, as if my attention alone could hold her steady. I'd think back to when we first met. She was a cashier at the A&P grocery store. I was 22, just laid off from the mill for the first time. She slipped me an extra apple in my paper bag and winked. From that day, she was my girl. We built a life in a small 2-story house on the south side of town. We raised 2 kids, David and Laura. We made it through layoffs, recessions, and 1,000 small battles that couples fight when the bills stack up higher than the paychecks. Now, here I was, 70 years old, sitting in a plastic chair that squeaked every time I shifted, trying to believe that love and stubbornness could keep her heart beating. Most mornings, I'd stop at the 7-Eleven across from the hospital. The clerk, a kid barely out of high school, would nod and ask the usual Mr. Harris, a black coffee, no sugar. I'd walk across the lot, steam rising from the cup, and brace myself for another day. Neighbors would check in, bringing casseroles or homemade pies. They meant well, but food didn't change the fact that I was sitting by Maggie's bedside, watching her fight for every breath. Our daughter Laura came often. She runs a bakery in town, always smelling of flour and cinnamon. She'd sit beside her mother, holding her hand, whispering stories about the grandkids. Sometimes she'd press a Tupperware of rolls into my hands and say, "Dad, you need to eat something that didn't come out of a vending machine." And then there was David. He lived an hour and a half away in Pittsburgh. He wore suits that cost more than my first car. When he did show up, he'd spend more time in the hallway on his phone than at his mother's bedside. That day when he brushed me off, checking tea times, I felt something break inside me. It wasn't just disappointment. It was a kind of grief all its own, the grief of realizing your child has grown into someone you hardly recognize. But in those early weeks, I still carried hope. I still believed Maggie would open her eyes. I still thought maybe David would remember where he came from, remember the woman who sewed his Halloween costumes by hand and cheered at every Little League game. I sat by her bed whispering prayers, rubbing her hand, hoping my warmth would seep into her skin. Sometimes at night when the halls went quiet and the janitor's mop echoed against the tiles, I'd close my eyes and picture our kitchen back home, the yellow linoleum, the smell of Maggie's pot, roast the laughter of Laura and David when they were small. I held on to those pictures like lifelines. Those nights in Mercy Hospital were the crucible. They hardened me, prepared me for what was coming. I didn't know it then, but every beep of the heart monitor, every ignored call from David was shaping the reckoning that lay ahead. I can still hear the snap in his voice like a door slamming shut. "Company matters come first, Dad. She's your problem." The words bounced around in my chest long after David walked out of the ICU wing. He didn't even pause to look at his mother, just adjusted the cuff of his shirt, slid his phone back into his pocket, and left. I sat there in the stiff hospital chair, staring at the empty space he'd just occupied, wondering if this was really the boy I raised. The next morning, I tried to push his words out of my head. Maggie's nurse, a young woman named Rachel, with bright pink sneakers, stopped by and said, "She's stable today, Mr. Harris. That's good." I nodded, though I knew stable in hospital language didn't mean much. Stable was a plateau before the next fall. Around noon, Laura showed up with a basket of muffins from her bakery. The smell of blueberry and cinnamon followed her in a small comfort against the sterile air of the ward. She kissed me on the cheek, set the basket on the side table, and walked over to her mother's bed. "Hi, Mom. It's me," she whispered, brushing Maggie's hair back from her forehead. Laura pulled up a chair and sat beside me. "How's she doing?" "The same. Breathing with the machine, not waking up." She sighed, tore a muffin in half, and handed me a piece. "You look tired, Dad. You need to eat." I chewed slowly, the sweetness sticking to my teeth. I wanted to talk about David, but the words stuck in my throat. Laura must have sensed it. "He came yesterday, didn't he?" I nodded. "For 5 minutes. Spent most of it checking golf tee times on his phone." Her mouth tightened. Unbelievable. I leaned back, rubbed my temples. He said, "Mom's my problem, like she isn't his mother too." Laura shook her head. "He's forgotten where he came from. He's too wrapped up in that corporate world, chasing clients' deals and golf rounds." The anger in her voice was sharp, but there was sadness too. David was her brother after all. Later that evening, I walked out to the hospital parking lot to stretch my legs. The sun was setting behind the smokestacks in the distance, painting the sky orange and gray. A couple of old mill guys I knew from years back were leaning against their trucks. They waved me over. "How's Maggie, Walt?" one of them asked. "Still fighting," I said. They nodded respectfully. One of them, Mike, squinted at me. "We heard your boy's been bragging in Pittsburgh. Says he's the only Harris who made something of himself." The words stung. I thought about all the nights I'd worked double shifts, all the times Maggie stayed up sewing clothes or clipping coupons to make ends meet. We made something of ourselves too, just not the way David measures it. That night back inside, I sat by Maggie's bed and thought about the man my son had become. I remembered the time I taught him how to swing a bat in our backyard, the time he cried when his bike tipped over on the cracked sidewalk. Somewhere along the way, he traded compassion for ambition, traded family for status. Laura came back in with her kids, Sarah and Tommy. They carried coloring books and spread them out on the floor. The quiet scratching of crayons filled the room. Laura leaned over to me and whispered, "They wanted to see Grandma even if she's asleep." I smiled faintly. She'd love that. Watching those kids, I realized something. They weren't worried about golf or clients or deals. They just wanted to be near their grandmother. It was that simple. The night dragged on. I couldn't shake David's words. "She's your problem." They weren't just careless, they were cruel. And in the weeks to come, I would discover they were more than just words. They were a sign of what he was willing to do and what I would have to do in return. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard David's voice echoing back at me. "She's your problem." It felt like a nail hammered deeper into my chest with each replay. By morning, I was so tired I could hardly stand. But I dragged myself into Maggie's room anyway. Because that's what you do when you love someone, you show up even when it hurts. Around mid-morning, Laura came in again, her hair tied back apron dusted with flour. She must have gone straight from the bakery. She carried a thermos of coffee in a paper bag that smelled of butter and sugar. "Morning, Dad. Thought you might need a real breakfast." She set the bag in my lap, 2 croissants still warm. I took a bite, the flakes crumbling down my chin. For a moment, I almost forgot I was sitting in a hospital. Laura pulled her chair close to her mother's bed. "Hi, Mom. It's me again." She took Maggie's hand and rubbed it gently. "You've got the grandkids waiting to see you. They miss you so much." Her voice cracked a little and she wiped her eyes. I looked away, pretending I was more interested in the black and white tiles on the floor. "Any word from David?" she asked after a while. I let out a low grunt. "Not since yesterday. I doubt he'll be back anytime soon." Laura gave me a look I knew well, the one that mixed disappointment with resignation. "You always made excuses for him when we were kids, Dad. You said he just needed time to grow up, but he's 41. He's not going to change." I didn't answer. I wanted to argue to defend him somehow, but I couldn't find the words. She was right. That afternoon, Laura brought her kids by. Sarah, who was 8, tiptoed to the bedside and whispered, "Hi, Grandma. I drew you a picture." She held up a crayon drawing of Maggie holding hands with the family in front of a big red house. Tommy, just 5, climbed onto my lap and asked Grandpa, "When will Grandma wake up?" My throat tightened. "I don't know, buddy. We just have to keep talking to her. She can hear us." He nodded seriously, like he believed every word. And maybe that was what kept me going, the belief of a child, pure and unshaken. Later, after the kids had gone, I walked down to the cafeteria. I ran into Mrs. Klein, an old neighbor from our street. She was waiting for her husband, who was recovering from surgery. We sat together at a sticky table drinking weak coffee from paper cups. "I saw your Laura in here yesterday," she said. "She's a good girl, always has been." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, she's been my rock." Then Mrs. Klein lowered her voice. "But I also heard your David's been talking big in Pittsburgh, says he's the only Harris who made it. You know how gossip travels." My jaw clenched. It wasn't the first time I'd heard that. Mike at the barbershop had mentioned the same thing, but hearing it again from a neighbor hit me harder. David wasn't just drifting away, he was rewriting our family's story to make himself look like the hero. When I got back upstairs, Laura was still there, humming softly to Maggie while she stroked her hand. I leaned against the doorframe and watched, thinking how different my 2 children had turned out. Same house, same parents, but worlds apart. On my way out that evening, I noticed David's car in the lot, a sleek black sedan with Pittsburgh plates. For a brief second, hope stirred in me. Maybe he'd had a change of heart. Maybe he came back to sit with his mother. But when I walked into the waiting room there, he was in a corner chair, Bluetooth in his ear, talking loudly about clients' deadlines and golf games. He didn't even see me walk past. I paused, listening just long enough to catch him laughing with someone on the other end. "Yeah, my old man's stuck with her. I've got bigger things to handle." That was it. The nail went in deeper. I turned and walked away, the sound of his laughter chasing me down the hall. It was a Thursday when the first stack of bills landed in my mailbox at home. I'd been at the hospital all morning, then drove back to pick up the mail and shower. The envelopes were thick, stamped in bold red letters. Statement payment, due final notice. I carried them to the kitchen table, sat down in Maggie's chair. It still smelled faintly of her lavender lotion, and started tearing them open one by one. The numbers made my head spin. Tens of thousands already, and that was just for the ICU stay, not counting what might come next. I rubbed my forehead, remembering all those years I'd worked double shifts at the steel mill, the overtime checks I'd stretched to cover braces for the kids, the mortgage, the car that always seemed to need repairs. We had savings. We had retirement. But now, seeing those bills, I wondered if it would all drain away before Maggie ever opened her eyes again. I drove back to Mercy Hospital with the envelopes in a folder tucked under my arm. Laura noticed right away. "What's that, Dad?" "Hospital bills." I dropped them on the chair beside me with a thud. She winced. "I can help a little. The bakery's doing all right, but I know it's not much." I patted her hand. "You've already done more than enough. You're here every day keeping me fed, watching over your mother. Don't you worry." But I was worrying. Later that night, when Laura took the kids home, I pulled out the folder and started going over the accounts. That's when I saw it. Some of the retirement funds weren't where they should have been. Transfers had been made, recent ones, and the name listed on the authorization, David Harris. My stomach dropped. I knew he'd been involved in managing some of the investments. We'd set it up years ago when I retired, but I never imagined he'd move money without even talking to me. The next morning, I stopped at Ray's barbershop, the place I've been going since 1975. The bell over the door jingled as I walked in, and the familiar smell of talc and shaving cream washed over me. A couple of the old mill guys were in their usual chairs swapping stories. Mike, the retired union steward, was in the middle of telling a joke, but when he saw my face, he cut it short. "How's Maggie, Walt?" "Still hanging on," I said. He nodded. "You hanging on?" I shrugged. "Trying to, but I found out David's been moving money out of our accounts without saying a word to me." The shop went quiet. Mike leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "That boy thinks he's slick, huh? Listen, Walt, you still hold the reins. Don't forget that. He might play big shot in Pittsburgh, but he can't erase who holds the rights." I sat there staring at the black and white checkerboard floor, feeling the weight of his words. Maybe Mike was right. Maybe I wasn't powerless. That afternoon, I went back to the hospital, sat beside Maggie, and told her everything, even though she couldn't answer. "He's dipping into our savings, honey. The money we worked for. The money you clipped coupons for every Sunday at the kitchen table." I don't know who he's trying to impress, but he's bleeding us dry. Her eyelids didn't flicker. Her chest rose and fell with the machine, but I kept talking anyway. I won't let him take what we built, Maggie. I promise you that. Later, Laura walked in carrying a casserole dish someone from church had dropped off. She saw the bills spread across the chair and the look on my face. What is it now? I hesitated, then handed her the folder. She leafed through it, her eyes narrowing. David did this. I nodded. She set the folder down and crossed her arms. Dad, you can't keep giving him the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't care. He's not going to change. I rubbed the back of my neck, staring at the floor. He's still my son. And Mom's still his mother, but look at what he's doing. Her words cut deep because they were true. That night I couldn't shake the thought. The hospital corridors felt colder, the coffee more bitter. For the first time, I began to wonder not just about Maggie's fight, but about mine. How much longer could I sit quietly while David treated us like baggage holding him back? I'll never forget that Sunday. Laura had invited me over for dinner. She said I needed a break from the hospital walls. Her little ranch house smelled like pot roast the minute I stepped through the door. The kids were running circles through the living room, giggling, their socks sliding across the hardwood. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tiniest lift in my chest. Laura set me down at the table, pressed a cold glass of sweet tea into my hand, and gave me that look only daughters can give, half stern, half tender. Eat, Dad. You can't keep running on coffee and vending machine crackers. I nodded, picked up my fork, and tried to enjoy the warmth of family, but I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. Maggie should have been sitting beside me, laughing at the kids, reminding me not to overdo it on the mashed potatoes. Instead, her chair sat empty in my mind, and every bite tasted hollow. We were halfway through the meal when the front door opened. David strolled in, still in his golf clothes, polo shirt, white shoes, spotless as if he hadn't even touched a fairway. He didn't knock, didn't greet anyone, just slid into the chair across from me, pulled out his phone, and started scrolling. Laura's jaw tightened, but she held her tongue. The kids looked at him, waiting for some acknowledgement, but he never lifted his eyes. I cleared my throat. Your mom's the same, no change. Doctor says we just have to wait. David finally glanced up, smirk tugging at his mouth. Dad, face it. She's not coming back. You're draining everything for nothing. You two never planned ahead, and now you're paying the price. The fork slipped out of my hand and clattered against the plate. Laura froze, eyes wide. The kids went silent. I stared at him, my voice low. That's your mother you're talking about. He shrugged, leaned back in his chair. I'm just being realistic. Somebody has to. You should have been smarter with your money. Now you're just dragging the rest of us down. Laura slammed her glass on the table so hard sweet tea splashed onto the placemat. Don't you dare talk about Mom like that. Her voice shook with fury. David rolled his eyes, muttering, always so dramatic. The room was thick with tension. Even the kids knew better than to breathe too loud. I felt my face burn, my heart pounding against my ribs. This wasn't just indifference anymore. This was contempt. I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping against the floor. Enough. I won't sit here and listen to you dishonor your mother in front of your sister and your children. For a moment, he looked like he might argue, but then he smirked again, the same way he did when he was a teenager testing boundaries. Only now the stakes were higher, the words sharper. I walked out onto the porch, needing air, needing space. Laura followed, closing the door behind her. She put her hand on my arm. Dad, I'm sorry. The kids didn't need to hear that. I shook my head. It's not your fault. He made his choice. She looked at me, her eyes wet. You can't let him keep doing this. To you, to Mom, to all of us. I stared out at the quiet street, the sound of cicadas buzzing in the evening air. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. The anger wasn't just a flicker anymore, it was a steady flame. That night back at the hospital, I sat beside Maggie and told her everything. I held her hand and whispered, he doesn't see your worth. But I do. And I promise you, Maggie, I won't let him strip away what we built. The machines hummed steady and unyielding, and somewhere in that rhythm I felt my resolve harden. I woke before sunrise, the kind of waking that happens when your mind has been working all night without your permission. The house was quiet, except for the old fridge cycling on and off. Maggie's robe still hung on the hook by the back door. I touched the sleeve the way you touch a relic, then let my hand drop and made coffee strong enough to take paint off a fence. Today wasn't about anger. It was about action. I slid the folder of bills and account statements into my old leather briefcase, the one Maggie bought me when I retired, and drove downtown. Youngstown was just waking up. Delivery trucks coughed in alleyways. The bakery where Maggie loved to get apple fritters turned its open sign around with a squeak. I parked near a pawn shop on Federal Street and climbed the narrow stairs to a second-floor office with a hand-painted door sign, Janice Carter Attorney at Law. The brass knob still stuck halfway. I'd forgotten that. Inside smelled like paper and lemon polish. A faded Buckeyes pennant hung beside a framed certificate. Janice stepped out from behind a battered oak desk, her hair pinned back no-nonsense eyes. Her father, Pete Carter, and I had worked side by side at the mill for 20 years. She hugged me the way people do when they've known you since you were young and strong. "Walt," she said softly, "how's Maggie?" She'd always called her by her first name, the way kids who grew up on the block do. "Still fighting," I said. "I need help." We sat. I put the folder on her desk and told her everything, the tea times, the words David said, the transfers I'd found, the hospital bills that kept multiplying. I didn't try to make David look better than he was. I was done covering for him. Janice listened, pen tapping. "You and Maggie added David as an authorized agent on a couple accounts when you retired," she said, scanning a statement, "and he's a signer on the family brokerage and the LLC you set up for the rental duplex. He doesn't own them, but he has room to move." My jaw tightened. "I want that room closed." She nodded. "We'll do 3 things. First, revoke his trading authority and signatory access. Second, update every institution with a letter from you, notarized, instructing a freeze on disbursements without your explicit approval. Third, we draft a durable financial power of attorney naming Laura as your agent, so if you're occupied at the hospital, she can sign and protect you." She paused, then added, "Fourth, we notify the bank that your family LLC's line of credit, which David tied to his company's corporate card and payroll sweep, is suspended unless you approve otherwise." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Can we do it fast?" Janice gave a half smile. Fast as small-town paper can move. She pulled a template-slipped carbon paper beneath it. Janice trusted computers as much as I trusted a dull saw, and started typing. The old machine chattered like a miniature factory line. We went document by document. She read each line out loud so nothing tricked me in the legalese. I initialed margins signed on the heavy lines, and she stamped things with a notary seal that bit the paper like a jaw. We made copies, one set for the banks and brokerage, one for me, one for her file. By mid-morning, we were at First Mahoning Credit Union. The manager, Mr. Alvarez, met us in a glass cubicle that smelled like new carpet. He remembered Maggie's laugh. Everybody did. Janice slid the letters across to him along with my ID and the old authorization forms. "I'm revoking my son's signatory rights," I said, effective immediately. Mr. Alvarez read carefully, then nodded. "We'll place a hold on any pending withdrawals and remove his access. You'll get an alert for every attempt going forward." He typed the keys, clacking. "You'll also want to change your online credentials." Janice handed me a sealed envelope. "Already generated. We'll update after we finish our stops." Next was the brokerage office, 2 blocks down, a place with a fake fern in the lobby and a television streaming market tickers. The representative, a young man with a haircut too sharp for his head, tried to talk to me like I was a confused grandfather. Janice fixed him with a stare that could cut wire. "We're revoking an agent authorization and requesting a compliance review of recent transfers," she said. "Owner present, notarized, process it." He processed it. I watched as his face changed from sales to compliance, monotone and careful. He photocopied my ID, scanned the letters, and had me sign a fresh specimen card. There may be a temporary freeze while compliance reviews everything he said. "That's the idea," I answered. We stopped for lunch at a diner where the waitress called everyone hon. I ate a turkey club I could barely taste, and Janice went over the POA with me one more time. "This gives Laura authority to act for you on finances. It doesn't give her ownership and you can revoke it, but it lets her stand between you and any bad decisions, yours or anyone else's. She's earned that," I said. "She's here. She shows up." The afternoon we spent at the courthouse annex, a low building with humming fluorescent lights, and a security guard who'd worked with me on the midnight shift back in '83. Janice filed certified copies sent 2 by overnight mail and faxed the rest from a machine that sounded like a dial-up modem crying. I signed for a stack of green return receipts. Each thump of the timestamp felt like another brick laid in a wall. Before we parted, Janice looked me in the eye. "Walt, this will make noise. David will call, he'll push. He might threaten to sue. Don't argue with him. Don't explain. If he calls you, tell him everything goes through me." "I can handle him," I said, quieter than I felt. She put a hand on my arm. "You've handled steel strikes, layoffs, and life with a spine most men wish they had. But the hardest thing is doing what you're doing right now, drawing a line with your own blood." I drove to Mercy Hospital with the late afternoon sun glaring off the windshield. I stopped at the 7-Eleven, bought a bouquet from the cooler cheap roses with drooping heads, and carried them up to Maggie's room. Rachel, the nurse in pink sneakers, smiled when she saw the flowers. "Any change?" I asked. "She's steady," Rachel said. "Stable." The word stung less than yesterday. I sat. I told Maggie everything I'd done, every form and stamp and signature. I told her Laura would help, that we'd lock the doors, that no one would siphon a dime of the life we built. I told her about Janice and the courthouse, and how Mr. Alvarez remembered her laugh, and how the girl at the diner called me hon and put extra pickles on the plate. I talked until the words ran out. Then I just held her hand and listened to the machine breathe with her. As twilight turned the window glass to a mirror, I saw our reflection, an old man with more stubborn left in him than anyone expected, and a woman who'd taught him how to love stubborn in the first place. Somewhere between the beep of the monitor and the sigh of the air vent, I felt something settle. Not peace. Peace would have to wait, but purpose. Tomorrow would bring the noise Janice warned me about, but tonight in this bright humming room, I'd made a promise and kept it. Saturday came up pale and thin, the kind of dawn that looks like it forgot to put on its color. I was back in Maggie's ICU room before the sun climbed the smokestacks, coffee scalding my tongue, the ventilator sighing like a tired old bellows. Rachel, the nurse in pink sneakers, checked the lines and murmured, "Steady as she goes, Mr. Harris." I nodded. Steady had become a kind of prayer for me, plain, unambitious, honest. I'd barely settled when my phone buzzed against the metal chair. David flashed on the screen. I let it ring out. It buzzed again, then again. I sighed, stepped into the hallway, and answered. "What is this?" he snapped, breathing hard. "Dad, my card just got declined at the club. The starter said my tea time's gone. Something's wrong with the accounts." I kept my voice level. "Good morning to you, too." "I have clients here," he hissed, dropping his voice. I could hear voices behind him, men laughing, ice chiming in glasses. "This is embarrassing. Fix it." "I can't fix it," I said. I changed it. A short, disbelieving laugh. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means I revoked your access. You don't move money that isn't yours to move. From now on, everything runs through me or Laura if I'm here with your mother." There was a beat of silence, like the phone had fallen into a well. Then he came back louder. "You can't do that." "You can't, Dad. I have payroll Monday. I have vendors. Another buzz on his end. He went quiet reading. Then he swore. My corporate card just froze. The bank app says, "Owner authorization required." "Did you do that? Did your small-town lawyer do that?" "Yes," I said. "Her name is Janice. She knows your mother. She knows me. She knows paper, and paper runs the world." He sucked air between his teeth. The sound took me back to when he was 10 and skinned his knee and tried not to cry. "Okay," he said, forcing calm. "Breathe. We'll just move forward with the Harris account at the brokerage." "That one isn't." "It is," I said. "All of it is." The laughter behind him died away. I pictured him turning in that polished foyer, the club's glass doors reflecting his expensive shirt back at him. For a moment, I felt sorry. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Janice Bank confirms freeze. Brokerage and compliance review. Keep calls brief. I slid the phone back to my ear. "Dad," he said, a tremor edging into the word. "My phone is blowing up. Claire says the country club canceled the foursome. They said my account is temporarily restricted." "What did you tell them?" "The truth," I said. "That the owner decides how his money is used." He went quiet again. Then a different kind of panic set in, the kind you hear when a man realizes the room is on fire and he doesn't know where the door is. I'm getting emails. Payroll. It isn't processing. It says the bank rejected the batch. Payroll draws against the Harris LLC sweep. When that froze, the batch died. I can't even Uber out of here. My card's dead. Dad, I have to get this back on, right now. Talk to Janice, I said. Everything goes through her. He tried a different tack, the voice he used on clients. Look, this is a misunderstanding. I moved funds short-term to service a line of credit. It's standard practice. I'll return. You moved your mother's retirement without telling me, I said. There's nothing standard about that. A second phone began ringing on his end, loud enough to bleed through his Bluetooth. He fumbled, cursed, and came back breathless. Unbelievable. A client just forwarded a link, a video clip from Sunday dinner that our cousin posted on Facebook. You can hear me saying, "She's your problem." And you can see my phone with the Tea Time app open. Dad, who would... People hear things I said, neighbors talk, family talks. This is a small town, David, and you said it. I didn't say it like that, he snapped, then seemed to realize how small that sounded. This is going to cost me, you understand. My partner's wife is on the food pantry board with someone from your church. They think I'm a monster. A client just texted, we're pausing the engagement until optics improve. Optics. They're canceling Dad. I looked back through the glass at Maggie, the ventilator feathering her chest. Optics, I repeated softly. Your mother used to say the only thing you can't fake is who shows up. He swallowed so hard I could hear it. Okay, just undo whatever she did. I'll come by the hospital, say hello, the whole thing. We'll take a picture. I'll post it. People like that. Don't, I said. Don't you dare turn your mother into a PR strategy. He tried to fire himself back up to grab the wheel. You're being unreasonable. The club is staring. I need this fixed, and I need it fixed now. I can sue. I will sue. You can talk to Janice, I said again. She'll take your call. He exhaled, shaky. Dad. I let the quiet stretch between us until it felt like a bridge that couldn't hold two men at once. On the other side of the glass, the heart monitor kept time. I thought of the countless mornings Maggie and I had climbed out of bed and gone to work, how we measured our plans in coupons and coffee cans and made a life anyway. I thought of Laura holding her mother's hand. I thought of David's glossy shoes and the way he wouldn't look up. He started again, softer. I didn't think. And for the first time in a long time, I could hear the boy in him. I know, I said. I did the thinking for both of us for a while. That's done. I drew a breath, felt it settle in my chest, and said the line that had waited there all week. Now you've got nothing but time. He didn't speak. A minute passed, or maybe 3. Somewhere down the hall, a cart squeaked. A janitor whistled a tune only he knew. Finally, David whispered Dad like he wanted me to take it back, like we were at the edge of the pool, and he needed a hand to pull him in. Call Janice, I said, and ended the call. My hands shook a little. I pressed my palms flat against the cool rail at the foot of Maggie's bed until the tremor faded. Then I sat, took her hand, and told her what had happened. The boy's in trouble, I said. The walls he leaned on aren't there anymore. The machine breathed with her. The monitor agreed or disagreed in careful little beeps. I kissed the back of her hand where the skin was thin and warm. We didn't start this, Mags, but I'm going to finish it right. The phone buzzed again. Janice this time. You okay? She asked. I will be, I said. Good. He's called me twice already. I'll route everything through compliance and HR. If he shows up, you don't engage. Monday, there's a community fundraiser at the high school auditorium. Yes? For the food pantry, I said. I plan to drop in quiet-like. Don't be quiet, she said. People already know the story. Better they hear it from the man who lived it. Let me make some calls. After we hung up, Laura arrived with a thermos and a bag of sandwiches. She looked at my face and knew. He called, she said. He did. How bad? I took the sandwich and unwrapped it slowly like the paper might explode. Bad enough to feel it. Money's locked. Club canceled their round. A client pulled out. That video clip's making the rounds. Facebook's doing what Facebook does. Laura stared at Maggie for a long moment. I don't like hurting my brother, she said finally. But he made this hurt happen. We're not hurting him, I answered. We're letting consequences find their address. She sat, handed me a napkin, and we ate in the hush of machines and filtered light. The bread tasted like nothing and everything. Somewhere in the quiet, I felt the old fear loosen its grip one finger at a time. There was still a long way to go, there always is when you're walking back toward the truth. But for the first time since the stroke, I believed we might get there. I stood and straightened the cheap store-bought bouquet on the sill. Outside, the day had finally put on its color. I touched Maggie's shoulder, and for a second, one heartbeat, I felt a faint reply under my fingers. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was hope getting stubborn. Either way, I took it like a sign. Monday, I told her, town's gonna hear the whole thing. The high school auditorium smelled like floor wax and popcorn salt, the way it did when Laura sang in spring concerts and David forgot his one line. Monday night, the lot was full. Windows glowed like a stove at supper time. A banner for the food pantry hung over the stage. 2 folding tables held coffee, a crock pot of chili and donation jars labeled with masking tape. Church ladies in cardigans moved people along with kind authority. Janice met me by the gym doors, a manila file under her arm. "You ready?" she asked. "As sure as I'll ever be," I said. "Maggie would have baked cookies for this." "She would," Janice said. "After the second song, Mr. Dunning will call you up. Keep it plain." People filed in with grocery bags for the pantry kids, in team hoodies, men with hands still marked by a day's work. The place had that Monday night hum, raffle tickets, cracking boots on bleachers, the band teacher tuning a trumpet that would never play quite in key. It felt like home and like judgment both at once. Laura slipped beside me with the kids. Sarah's glitter headband caught the lights. Tommy rolled a matchbox car along the cinder block wall. "Say what's true," Laura whispered. "That's enough." The program started, teenagers on guitars, a quartet singing an old hymn, the PE teacher joking about canned peas. When Mr. Dunning tapped the mic and said my name, the sound of chairs scooting seemed louder than the applause. I took the aisle, slow. Faces I'd known for 40 years lined the rows, men from the barbershop, ushers from church, the mail carrier who honks from his truck. "I'll be brief," I said. "Most of you know my wife, Maggie. She's been in the ICU 3 weeks. You've prayed, brought casseroles, watched my place when I forgot trash day. Thank you. I need to say something plain," I went on, "and I need witnesses. My son David came to the hospital. He checked golf tee times on his phone and told me, 'Company matters come first, Dad. She's your problem.'" Mrs. Klein folded her program. Someone near the bleachers exhaled a curse and stopped himself. "I've spent years trying to make my kids' lives easier," I said. "Maybe I did it so well my boy forgot what it costs to be a family. That's on me. But I didn't forget who owns what. Today, I used that right. I didn't hold up papers, but folks looked at Janice's file like it could talk. I revoked David's access to our accounts and the little LLC we built," I said. "Laura will help me while I sit with Maggie. We're not chasing dollars. We're protecting 47 years of pay stubs and coupons." A hand rose, Mr. Alvarez from the credit union. "We've got you, Mr. Harris," he said. "I'm not here to shame a man," I said. "Truth stings. Tea times aren't more important than a mother breathing. If saying that keeps one child in a hospital chair instead of a clubhouse, I'll take the sting." Heads turned toward the side aisle. David slipped in wearing a dark suit. Claire followed tight-lipped. He walked straight down the center. "Dad," he said, not on the mic. "Let's talk privately." "We are," I answered. "This is where we live." He faced the crowd with the smile he keeps for clients. "There's a lot of misinformation," he said. "I love my mother. I'm balancing a complex," Mr. Dunning spoke from the wing voice even. "A man's best is measured by what he does when his people need him." Color rose in David's face. "This is a witch hunt," he snapped. "You don't understand finance. Payroll vendors' optics mic from the union hall stood. We understand showing up." From the back, the grocery store manager raised a hand. "My mom passed last year," she said. "We took shifts. I didn't answer email for a week. The store kept. Families keep before companies." Clapping began small and spread. A man in the aisle stood next the billboard kind. "My wife's on the pantry board," he said. We heard the clip. He looked at David, then at me. "We can't do business with a man who talks about his mother that way." He slid an envelope into the jar. "Mr. Harris, our prayers are with you." David's mouth worked and nothing came out. He looked smaller than he had in Little League. Claire touched his sleeve and found her hand unwelcome. I took the mic again. "Enough," I said. This isn't about knocking anyone down. It's about lifting what matters. My wife matters. Your families matter. This pantry matters. From tonight, Laura helps manage our affairs until Maggie comes home, God willing. That's the statement. Laura stepped up. She didn't pose. She just put a hand on my shoulder. The kids hovered near the aisle, trusting the roof. Janice leaned to the mic. For those asking, she said, crisp but kind, the documents are filed, the account's secure. If something needs Mr. Harris, contact me. Let the family be a family. Mr. Dunning tried to move to the raffle. People kept standing. Hands found my shoulders. Bills slid into jars. Cards slipped into Janice's fingers. The air smelled like chilly winter coats and gym varnish. David didn't blow up. He drained out the side aisle, a man finally meeting the cost of the story he chose to tell. Outside March bit clean. Mrs. Klein caught my arm. Tell Maggie I'll sit Wednesday night, she said. Nobody should be alone in a bright room. She hasn't been, I said. Not once. Laura tucked her arm through mine. You okay, Dad? I'm steadier than yesterday, I said. Janice closed her file. The hard part isn't paper, she said. It's saying the truth where it can be heard. You did that. We stood a minute. Across the lot, the banner sagged on one corner. Mr. Dunning jogged out to retie it. We had named what matters in public. Sometimes that's enough to start the world turning back the right way. On the drive back from the high school, Laura kept one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around a lukewarm cup she'd grabbed off the fundraiser table. The wipers ticked slow across a mist that wasn't rain and wasn't fog, just Ohio deciding what to be after dark. You did right, she said, eyes on the road. You said it where folks could hear it. I didn't answer. My throat felt worked raw, like I'd been sanding truth down to make it fit. Outside, blinking store signs reflected across the hood, Pawn Pizza Pharmacy. Ordinary lights that had kept our town lit through better times and worse. Mercy Hospital's lobby was mostly empty, the night guard watching a ball game on a small TV with the sound low. I signed the visitor clipboard, the cheap pen leaving a groove before any ink came. Laura squeezed my shoulder and took the stairs 2 at a time with the kids. I rode the elevator alone, listening to cables hum like a distant cello. On the ICU floor, I could smell the things that had become the air I breathed: citrus sanitizer, coffee, cooked too long, rubber gloves snapped off and thrown away. Rachel met me at the nurse's station, pink sneakers peeking from under her scrubs. How'd it go, she asked. People showed up, I said. Sometimes showing up is half the job. She nodded like she already knew. She's steady, she added, and the word landed soft tonight. Doctor said her pressures look a hair better. In Maggie's room, the monitors made their familiar conversation, small green words we'd been learning to read. I set the flowers we'd rescued from the fundraiser beside the cheap roses I'd bought days ago. I told Maggie everything about Mr. Dunning's microphone, about Mrs. Klein's steady hand, about how the pantry jars filled faster after the hymn, about Laura's fingers anchored on my shoulder like a flag in solid ground. I told her the town still knew how to be a town. I was halfway through recounting the raffle joke when the door eased open. David stood there in his dark suit hair, too carefully parted for this hour. He looked smaller without a crowd. Claire hovered at his elbow, her face a map of second thoughts. "Dad," he said, voice quiet enough to belong in this room. "Can I come in?" I glanced at Rachel. She lifted a shoulder. "Your call." I thought of Janice's file of the frozen accounts of the town hall, full of faces that had watched my boy try to sell his way out of truth. "You can walk in," I said. "You can sit. You can keep your phone in your pocket. You can look at your mother." He stepped to the bed and stared like he was meeting a relative for the first time at a reunion. "Mom," he said, barely above the ventilator's breath. "It's me." His hand hovered, then landed light on her wrist where the tape held the line in place. "I'm sorry," he added, the words coming like a man opening a rusted gate. "I said things I shouldn't have said. I didn't show up." He swallowed. "I forgot what I'm from." I stood at the window and watched our reflections float on the black glass, an old man, a tired nurse, a woman asleep under a tangle of careful tubes, a son unlearning his own voice. "Apologies are a start," I said. "They're not a fix." "I know," he answered. "Tell me what to do." "You can sit," I said. "You can read to her from the Psalms. You can hold her hand and not look at the clock. You can call Janice tomorrow and talk like a man who understands paper and consequences. And you can come back Tuesday and Wednesday and the Wednesday after that." Claire touched the doorframe like she needed the wall to agree with her. "We brought soup," she said nervously, lifting a paper bag. "It's from that place she liked on Belmont. Chicken noodle, not spicy." Rachel smiled. "I'll label it for the family fridge." Laura slipped in behind them with the kids. No performance, no speeches. Sarah taped a drawing to the cabinet grandma, in a blue dress standing in front of a house with square windows and smoke that always curls the way kids draw it. Tommy craned up on his toes and whispered into the rail, "Wake up soon, okay?" The room felt less like a machine and more like a porch. Someone laughed at something small. No one felt bad about it. Around midnight, the doctor made rounds with a tired resident in tow. He adjusted a drip and checked reflexes with a little rubber hammer. "Subtle improvements," he said, voice careful. "Bodies take their time." He nodded at me. "Yours has been here every day. It matters." After they left, I took Maggie's hand, the way I had since prom night, palm to palm, wedding ring pressing into the groove it made over decades. "If you're in there, Mags," I said, "you keep coming. We'll keep sitting." Her fingers twitched the faintest answer, or maybe the air moving just right. I chose to take it as yes. Hope doesn't always arrive like a brass band. Sometimes it's a moth tapping the screen. Toward morning, the hospital softened. The night janitor's radio slipped into oldies. The coffee in the waiting room burned to a crust, and someone mercifully made a new pot. Laura dozed in the chair with a blanket Rachel found. Sarah and Tommy nested against her like puppies. David sat straight-backed reading from a little green Gideon Bible with a crease in the cover. He didn't do it well. He stumbled on words he'd mouthed as a boy, but he did it. Claire held a styrofoam cup with both hands and watched Maggie breathe. I stepped into the hall to stretch my knees and found Mr. Alvarez walking toward me, coat over his arm. Swinging by on my way in, he said, sheepish about his tie, "Wanted to tell you the paperwork's clean. We're square." He looked past me into the room and lowered his voice. "Town's talking about last night in a good way. The pantry counted more than they expected. That's on you two." "It's on Maggie," I said. "She's been feeding people one way or another since '74. When I came back in, Rachel was at Maggie's bedside, eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen. "Look," she whispered, "just look." Maggie's eyelids fluttered one too, then opened a sliver. The room went so quiet, even the monitor seemed to hold its breath. Laura's hand flew to her mouth. Tommy froze mid-fidget like he'd been told to freeze and tag. David whispered Mom the way a boy asks for permission. Maggie didn't speak. Her eyes moved slow as winter sunrise from Laura to the kids to me. I stepped close enough for the lines to tug at my belt buckle and put my hand where it had been all night. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly. "We're here." A tear slid into her hairline, and it felt like a cathedral had just opened its doors. Rachel grinned at the ceiling, then bustled into action, calling the doctor, jotting numbers, doing her job with the relief of someone who gets to deliver good news for once. The rest of us did the only thing left, stood still, and let gratitude rearrange the furniture inside our chests. Hours later, after the doctor's cautious words and the nurse's practical instructions, I walked down to the lobby to breathe. The fundraiser banner still hung in my head. The line I'd spoken there hung too, but not like a weapon anymore. "Now you've got nothing but time. Time to sit. Time to show up. Time to let a son become a man in the slow work of showing up again and again." I wasn't about to forget the damage or pretend consequences weren't owed, but I could make room for the kind of hope that holds people to a standard and still keeps a chair open at the table. If you've listened this far, friend, maybe you know what I learned under fluorescent lights and the watchful eyes of neighbors show up even when it hurts. Call the people who raised you. Take a turn in the hospital chair. If this story reminded you of someone you love, share it with them tonight. And if you want more plain lived-in stories like this about family second chances and the kind of courage that looks like staying, stick around with us. We make room here.